Hello, I want to formally introduce myself. My name is Sophia. I am an ex-film student. I specialized in sound and I've been meaning to do this for a very long time. I am very passionate about film and shows and art, and I thought it would be a really great idea to start a channel to talk about these things that really matter to me and to talk about them in a more analytical way and a more nuanced way, and to share what I think about works I really love and I really hold dear to my heart, or works I don't like at all and I want to talk about them too. And I wanted to start this channel with my favorite film of all time, and its remake, the wonderful West Side Story by Robert Wise and Jerome Robbins, amongst other people, and the 2021 remake by Steven Spielberg. I want to first start by saying that I am by no means a scholar in any of these subjects, so what I am going to say in this video is nothing more than my opinion and my point of view and my analysis of things. So with that said, take that with a grain of salt. I am not saying that I hold the truth, the universal truth of the world, and therefore I do this to create a space to share thoughts about art and to be able to build maybe a community and find people that feel the same about these works I intend to talk about in this channel. And I want to thank you all for being here, if you are here. And so basically what I tried to do watching these films, I just wanted to begin by doing a broad analysis of them, both technically and artistically and creatively. But then as I watched the films through and through, I realized they're very different films in the sense that they don't talk about the same thing. They use the same facade to say like that, but they're not the same film at all. I want to talk about how the characterization of the players in the film, of the roles of the characters, is the main reason why the movies aren't the same movie and they don't talk about the same things at all. And so I wanted to, give this first part of developing my thoughts in regard of how each character is different from their counterpart, and give you examples of how that happens, how that's shown through the film, to talk about the changes they did in the script and how they affect the movie and what the songs end up meaning, and to conclude I don't want to talk about which is best, because they're very different films and they come from very different perspectives and times. So I don't think there's a winner in that sense. I prefer the original one, but that's just my preference. I love musical theater and I love musicals in general. It's probably my favorite genre in film. And so I am biased because it's such a classic, the original one, the 61 version. But that's not to say that Spielberg's version is not absolutely incredible. And having said all that, I want to kick it off by giving it a bit of context to both films, which is, of course, as most of you know, and if you don't know, maybe you should know, West Side Story is loosely based off of William Shakespeare's Romeo and Juliet, who, if you don't know what it is about, you do, because a lot of modern art, especially literary and filmic, cinematographic art, is based off of Romeo and Juliet, which is about two households, both alike in dignity, in Verona, that have each a child, and they fall in lust and drama ensues, and it ends up in a lot of people getting killed. So, in the 50s, Jerome Robbins, a well-renowned choreographer and musical director, was hanging out with his lover, with Montgomery Clift, and they were seeing this news in the newspaper of rivaling gangs of New York. And Montgomery Clift gave Jerome this idea, or asked about what he thought of this idea of maybe trying to talk about that subject, because it was something that touched on US society at that time, or at least New York society. They went back and forth thinking of what they could use to represent these two houses, the Capulets and the Montagues, what could be a good idea, which rivaling gangs, and they first thought of it as a religious fight between Protestants and Catholics, I believe. But then, doing research, they found of the turmoil that was happening in the West Side, in between the immigrants that were coming in at that time and the descendants of immigrants that had come to New York many years ago, of how they were battling for this ground in which they didn't feel, any of them, any true connection or any feeling of home, of warmth, because they've always been othered in that society, and they had been for many years. They still were fighting for that, and so they came to come up with the Sharks, which is a Puerto Rican side, which would be the Capulet family, and the Jets, which are the Montagues and are the Irish, Polish, Italian Americans that were living in the West Side at that time. And they found this really smart way of squaring that up and bringing it together so it would make sense. And then they started working on it. And of course, then Arthur Lawrence came in, he did the book. And then Leonard Bernstein came in, he did the music. And then of course the late great Stephen Sondheim, my idol, one of my personal favorite men in the world, came in to do the lyrics. And then it was a huge success on Broadway, because it was the first time a musical felt as rough as reality was. Musicals have this long history, both in theater and in film, to be an escape from reality and to not have to handle things that weren't comfortable for people to handle. They were an escape from war, because of course, as you know, film started in the 1900s, and having had both world wars in the midst of the birth of film, they made this genre, the musical genre, to be very, very hopeful and very colorful and very over the top and really big glam productions. And West Side Story on Broadway was one of those first feelings of musicals don't have to always be fun and whimsical and colorful. They can be gritty and they can hurt, and they can talk about really hard topics like the crisis of the immigrants and the housing crisis and the getting left behind by a society that doesn't want you, which was very, very groundbreaking at the time. And they had a lot of issues throughout production to get it done, and one of the most notable was that Sondheim had to change a lot of his lyrics because they were too explicit for theater and afterwards for film. And so the show opened in 1958 on Broadway, and it was a huge success. They decided to do the movie, and Jerome Robbins said he would do it if he was able to choreograph and direct. And so the hunt for the people to be able to bring these roles into film started. They set on Natalie Wood for Maria, even though Natalie Wood is very clearly not Latin American, but that's fine. It was the time. We can't be thinking about the past with a modern eye. It doesn't make any sense. Of course, Natalie Wood got Maria, and then of course Richard Breimer got the Great Tony, which I don't like very much as a character, but I will touch on that later. And the movie happened, and there was a lot of crises within the film. One of which Jerome Robbins was asked to step down because he didn't have the full grasp of how to direct a film, and so they brought in Robert Wise, but then the choreographies were made by him, and most of the choreographed scenes, dance scenes, were directed by Jerome, but then most of the other parts of the film were directed by Wise. It doesn't matter. Many things happened. The movie was a huge hit. It was a very big, groundbreaking film, as was the play, the show. On Broadway, it was very groundbreaking in that same sense that they had just got out of the golden age of Hollywood musicals. That you had musicals like Hello Dolly and Meet Me in St. Louis and Singing in the Rain that are so colorful, and they have the grand choreographies, and they're so hopeful and so beautiful to see, and Fred Astaire dancing with Ginger Rogers, and all this great feeling of hope that West Side Story didn't have. It does have glimpses of it, of hope, but it's a very, very heartbreaking film throughout. Then Steven Spielberg was born in 1946, and he watched this film when he was very young. As we know, Steven Spielberg, he's a very big film buff, as you can see on his autobiographical film, The Fabelmans. And he saw this film, and he's been quoted for the press for this movie, saying that West Side Story was that one project he always wanted to do, because he holds the first film so dearly in his heart that he knew he wanted to do it at some point, and it didn't come until very late in his career. He's still alive, of course, and he's still doing films, but he did the film in 2021, and he's been doing films since he was a kid, like professionally much later than that, but but yeah, he's been quoted saying that it was like his big project, and that he's been wanting to do this forever, and that he wanted to find the right time because he didn't feel ready to direct a big scale musical, because it is true that directing a musical must be really hard to make it work as you want to work, because you have to get very in touch with the tone of musicals and with how to handle that properly on film, which I think personally it's a problem in modern filmmaking in terms of how to do a musical. They tend to waddle to very different radical places of either very campy without knowing they're being very campy, or very rough, like Les Miserables, Jesus Christ, Les Miserables, by the Hooper fella, which is which was a choice, the same guy that did Cats. And you have that side, and then you have the great side that is Mamma Mia, that's so, it's fun, it's being drunk in Greece, as was the cast drunk in Greece, and probably Philip Lloyd as well. And then you have like this very weird middle ground right now where they don't know how to handle doing musicals without going into the ridiculousness of musicals that is inherent to musicals. Musicals are very cringe, and you have to embrace that to make that pass better, and it's hard. And so Spielberg was very scared to do that, but he found the time to do it, and it was hard because of COVID happened, and he got to it and he did it, and he addressed many issues he found in the first film, and that people have found in the first film, audiences, the brown phase that happened, with Rita Moreno and George Shakiris, which is funny. Fun fact: George Shakiris, who plays Bernardo in the original 61 version, was cast having just played Riff in the Western version, which is funny. I think it's very funny. And well, yeah, the brown face with all the Puerto Rican characters, and of course the subject matter of how the lyrics spoke of Puerto Rico sometimes, which was changed for the first film. They asked to change some things for the first film in America, in the song America, and then again in the 2021 version there was this Ariana DeBose talked about in an interview how she talked to both Stevens, Spielberg, and Sondheim about the problematic ways that Puerto Rico is pictured, is said that even though Anita in story has this sort of spite for Puerto Rico in the original and in the Broadway version, all that she wanted to change that a bit, because most of the people that immigrate in the sense that the Puerto Ricans in West Side Story immigrate don't do it out of want, they do it out of need. And so yes, of course, I'm not gonna touch in political stuff right now. But yeah, they had to change around some things in several instances, in several songs, for clarity, for problematic issues and things like that. And of course that the casting now was that every single character that was Puerto Rican was Latino in some way. Most of them are, I think, Puerto Rican. I don't have the data right now. I am going to look for it, and you're gonna see like a thingy here that says whether that's right or not. And yeah, many songs changed places, which I want to speak of that. Of course, people who performed the songs originally don't anymore, and vice versa. And of course, how they handled the entirety of the setting, of the tone of the film, of the stakes of the film. And I think this is the best bridge to get into it, how they handled the Puerto Ricans in the film, in contrast to the original Sharks. They don't exist as such, the Sharks. They exist as Puerto Ricans, they're immigrants, it's all of them. It's not against a gang, it's not against a group of people, it's not teenagers battling against teenagers. It's really angry teenagers fighting against an entire group of people because they feel threatened. And so that's I think the biggest change, and that's what makes, I think, the whole movie, both movies, so different. And that's how I'm gonna start talking about what I wanted to say. I'm really sorry, this is a very long introduction. The original West Side Story is a love story with a bit of social commentary, and it's very dreamlike, it's very childish, not in the maturity level of how they did the film. I think it's a very incredibly mature film in this filmmaking sense and in the topic sense, but I feel like the characters within West Side Story are very childlike, they're very teenage-like, they're very young, they're very naive. And the new West Side Story is not a love story, it's a social movie that uses the love story as an excuse to be told. What am I saying with this? The original West Side Story is moved entirely by the love story of Tony and Maria. Of course, it's Romeo and Juliet. The thing is, it depends on how you, and the point of view you have on it. It can be read as it's a love story that's doomed by plot, which it is, or it's a story about two parts, two groups of people, either they be family or they be marginalized immigrants and immigrant descendants in a society that doesn't want them, that's fighting against one another for reasons that they don't know, and they're using this love story as an excuse to let the violence out. That's what I want. That's my point. I think that the original West Side Story is, even though of course it was very groundbreaking at the time, because it was very dark in subject matter. When you see it against the new one, it's really hopeful. It's very young. It's very fresh. It's very soft. It's very fun. And the new one is very dark and it's very sad, and it's impossible to get excited about Tony and Maria because you know that no matter what, they're doomed. There's no hope in the new one. And in the original one, there was this tiny sense of hope that was given by the wonderful performances by Brymer and Natalie Wood. Because they are wonderful. I mean, I'm not a big fan of Tony's character because I think he's very bland in both versions. But there's this sense of... I am going to start talking about the characters. And I am going to start to talk about Tony.
Something's coming.
Tony has this sense in the original of wonder and of goodness in him. There's so much goodness in the original Tony. I remember the first time I saw the film being conscious, because this is a film that's been part of my life for a very long time. My paternal grandmother loves this film. My father loves this film. And they played it for me, and I really liked it when I was younger, but then I saw it being conscious and having started to study film. I remembered the impact that Tony had on me, of seeing him be the good guy, be the nice guy, be the one that's working because he wants to get a better life, and that he feels inherently good. He feels inherently nice and bright-eyed and hopeful for the future, and the big smile and the blue eyes that so contrasted with his skin and with his hair, and he feels very much like Superman. For me, Tony's Richard Brymer is very Clark Kent in the way they handled the character, and having him be presented to us through Riff in the sense of childlike fraternity that they have, which is very beautiful to see. There's so much love in between Riff and Tony. They love each other so much and they care for each other so much, and I feel that Tony is the one that matured before the rest of the guys, and so he's trying to bring them in to adulthood with him. That's why he left the Jets. It's not because of something that he did, or the way that he is handled in the film feels like that there's just like inherent goodness in Tony. And this Richard Brymer, Something's Coming, which is not sung by him, but he does a really great impression of lip syncing the song. It's so beautiful and so hopeful, and I love him in the way that they present it. It's an epiphany for him. He's alone, he's singing to no one, he's singing to himself, and it comes out of this really big need of expressing his innermost thoughts of the dreams he's been having to anyone that would listen, which is in that moment himself. He's not singing this to anyone. I love that song. And I love the way Brymer performs Tony. He feels so romantic and so soft and so nice. He's so nice, but he's like a really nice guy, but not like a nice guy. He's an actual nice guy, you know? And then you come to Ansel Elgort's Tony, that, of course, leaving aside that the actor is a piece of shit, I think Elgort is the weakest link of the entire cast, which is a pity because he's, of course, the protagonist of the film. And I don't like that we are presented, of course, the relationship between Riff and Tony is very different in the new version to what it was in the original version, because Riff is very, very different and the Jets are very different, and I am going to speak about this in a second, but right now it's Tony. Elgort is just absolutely defeated by life, and he feels as if he wants to die tomorrow, if he can, if possible. He wants to believe there's a better future for him, and that there's hope for him, and that there's hope for the rest of his friends, and that they can manage to get out of the filth they were born in. But he is absolutely conscious that that's not gonna happen, and that he has been doomed since he was born, that they both were. And that's the first way in which the hopefulness that the original has doesn't, because I think that the heart of the hope of the story is within Tony, for me. And Elgort's Tony doesn't have hope at all. He regrets so many things, and you can feel that burden in him. And we see Tony introduced by Riff. They have mostly the same conversation the original Tony and Riff have, except they touch on a lot of different matters. And of course, and the biggest difference is, since they both know that they're not getting anywhere in life, they're very angry. Tony's very sad, and Riff is very angry at life, existence, at everything. And so this Tony is very, very regretful and very, very sad and very, very not hopeful. And of course there are glimpses of him that's biggest. He's trying to get himself to believe that things could be better for him, whereas Breimer's Tony knows within himself that things are gonna be better. And also, since we don't get all the background information about what happened with Tony before the film, in the original film, since we know in this one we are presented with the fact that Tony almost killed someone, and that's the reason why he had to leave the Jets, was because he was in prison. We don't get that information in the first West Side Story. We just know that Tony's working at Dogs and that he doesn't want to be a Jet anymore. And here we have a clear motivation of why he wants to get away from the Jets. Is he doesn't want to end up in jail, he doesn't want to end up killing someone, he doesn't want to surrender his life to his anger. And the original Tony is not angry, he's just nice, he's just nice. So yeah, we have that biggest difference, is that Elgort has a lot of anger within him, as have all the Jets, a lot of anger within themselves. And the original does, and that's the biggest difference between them. And since they're the protagonist and they're the ones who get the thing going, and that I feel of course the beginning of the film sets the entire tone of the film, but the Tonys of the film set the entire tone of how we're going to relate to the relationship and to the characters and to all of that. And what happens? When we're presented with something's coming in the first film, we find it as an epiphany that Tony knows that there's something big waiting for him. Just in front of him, he's missing it, but he knows it's right in front of him. And there's this really beautiful moment, 61s. Something's coming, is happening. The air is humming, and something great is, in that the air is humming, we see the camera lift Tony's hands. I think I'll try to put the clip. I don't know if it's gonna get monetized. I'm imagining it will, but I'll describe it if not, and if I happen to be able to put it, I'll put the image and my voice. Like, I'm doing commentary on the movie, okay? We have this, like, tilt up to Tony's hands in the air is coming, humming, and you see fabric flowing because there's someone that hung out their laundry. But we have, of course, the air is humming and something great is coming. And when we see Maria for the first time, we learn that she works in a fabric store, in a dress shop. Which is I may be reading too much into it, but I love that the air is humming and something great is, and we see the fabric, we see the wind, we see how it's blowing, and that whatever is coming for him, and I love that then it jumps to, and it's coming, and Tony grounds himself. Something great is coming. I love that. It feels meant to be. It feels predestined. And my problem with the new blocking for the song is that Something's Coming is sung to Valentina by Tony. Who is Valentina? You may ask yourselves. It's the way of getting Rita Moreno in the film without it looking too obvious. Rita Moreno is, of course, the great actress who played Anita in the 61 version. She's one of the greatest actresses of film history and in general. She, I believe, is an EGOT winner. One of the few EGOT winners. We love her. She's incredible. I love her. I love Rita Moreno. She's so wholesome. She played Anita in the original 61. She won the Oscar for it. She's great. And since there weren't a lot of female characters other than Maria, Anita, and the background. Well, of course, Graciela, but we don't see a lot of her in the original film. They made the change of having Doc be an old Irish guy, which he, of course, is as well in the movie now. They have Valentina be Doc's wife, widow. And of course, she's a mirror of what Tony is going to or could potentially have. What do I mean by this? What do I mean by this? In the new version, in the 2021 version, Tony, after having had the conversation with Riv, they both go into the shop. Here in the basement, they go up to the shop with Valentina, and then Riv leaves, and she asks Tony, I don't remember exactly what, and Tony starts singing to her, Something's Coming. It could be, who knows? And it doesn't feel as an epiphany. It doesn't feel meant to be as was the original, but it does feel like he's serenading her because he sings to her and he carries her around. Of course, it's not like he's singing it to her like he's in love with her, of course, but he does sing it to her as like a funny way of showing her he trusts her with his innermost thoughts. But also I read it as Tony singing this song of hope to what could potentially be his future without him knowing, which could be also read as being predestined. But what I find is that since he's not alone, it doesn't feel that meant to be. It doesn't feel like the inherent need, the need to sing out loud. There's this thing that a wonderful man once said, Howard Ashman. If you don't know who he is, you do know because you've watched, I'm pretty sure, one of the Disney Renaissance films, especially The Little Mermaid. Howard Ashman said something along the lines of, songs happen in musicals because when you feel something so strongly that you cannot express it into words, you dance. And when that feeling overcomes you even further, you sing. And that's how you get the I Want songs in the musicals in general, especially in the Disney Renaissance era of the I Want songs. And Something's Coming could be a bit like Tony's I Want song. Of course, as the movie and the story goes, Tony feels disconnected from the Jets, in the sense that he knows he needs to put a barrier down because he doesn't want to be in jail the rest of his life. But still, he knows that he's so tethered to what they are because he is like them. Even though he doesn't like it, even though he doesn't want to see it, even though it doesn't work for him, he knows that he can't escape the fate of a Jet. And so there's a lot of, yes, of course, standing on the sidelines, but not because he feels he has better to do, but because he knows that if he goes back in, it'll lead nowhere good for him. So there's this sense of course, a lot of guilt that we see in Elgort's Tony that we don't see in Breimer's Tony. Yeah, he changes. He's very different, and having him be so gloomy really puts us in a much darker, grounded reality compared to original film.
Por favor, Anita. You are my friend. Stop it, Maria.
Maria. When we're introduced to Natalie Wood's Maria, she is joking around in the couture shop, in the dress shop she works. It's not couture, it's just a dress shop she works at, where Anita works as well. And she's just playing and talking with Anita about the dress she's gonna wear for the ball tonight. And she's very bubbly, she's very bright, she's very, 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 very naive. She's an ingenue in all the sense of the word. Maria is, just like a really cute girl. She's a girl, and she's very girly, and in the way that she doesn't feel as if she knows what living entails. That makes sense. She feels very, very girlish, as one does when one is protected by their family. Like in the way you act when you're still young and you don't know anything about life, and you have everything done for you, and yes, you start working, but it's just like a job. One point, of course, that changed is that in the original 61 version, Bernardo and Maria's parents are in New York. We never see them, we hear them. And in the new one, they're not. Maria came to live with Bernardo and Anita completely on her own, and she left family behind, as did Bernardo when he first came to New York. Woods Maria is very, she's very naive, she's very soft, she's very bubbly, she's very bright, she's funny, she's kind, but she's, of course, and more than anything, a girl. She's a girl. She has this perspective of what New York could be for her. She has a very dream-like scenario of literally the American dream of, yes, I'm going to be happy and I'm going to dance and have fun and meet a cute boys and just live the life of an American girl, of an American teenager. And in contrast, you have Zegler's Maria, which I love. I love the character changes they did for Maria, who is also very bright and very bubbly and very bright-eyed. But Maria Zegler feels a lot more mature. She feels a lot more in line with what Bernardo and Anita represent. In the original, Maria is very much like Bernardo and Anita's, not even little sister, like their daughter, because they treat her as such. She's to be protected, she's to be taken care of. And Segler's Maria, there's this scene that's not in the original, where Segler stands up to Bernardo.
Sí, como un gángster.
It was embarrassing. And he's apologizing.
Perdón.
I'm a grown-up now, Bernardo. I can dance with anyone I like.
And she tells him that she's working just as much as he is, and that she has been keeping the family fed since she was very young, and that he has no right to treat her as a child. And I love that. I love how this Maria feels more accurate to what the immigrant experience is, especially being a woman, especially being so young. We as women in the society we live have to mature very fast. And of course, in the 50s, coming from Puerto Rico to New York, after being left to take care of the family when you were very young because your older brother leaves home, of course you grow up fast, and of course you have to learn really quickly how the world works and how you are perceived. And that's the biggest change is that Segler's Maria is much more conscious of what living and being an adult is like. So Segler's Maria is an adult and she has a lot of agency. She's very outspoken and she's very upfront, and she has a lot of qualities that normally were just kept for Anita. I really like that Segler's Maria is much more outspoken about what she wants out of life and what she wants out of her future, and it's not a dream, it's something that she wants to make happen. She's very nice, very refreshing to see her character be like that, because it brings a lot of changes to the relationship of Tony and Maria. Primers and Woods, Tony and Maria, feel meant to be, in the sense that they don't have to utter a single word to know that this is it. And the first time we feel something deep, deep and profound and abstract in the first film is when Tony and Maria cross eyes for the first time, because the original is very playful. I love how they present the Jets. That they're all in a playground. The Jets are presented in a playground. They tell you from the very beginning, after seeing the entirety of New York from up top, that the Jets are children and they're playing a child's game. And that first scene that I think is a masterclass in how to start a film and how to film musicals. So kudos to Mr. Robert Wise, and Mr. Jerome Robbins, of course. They're playing a game, the Jets and the Sharks. And the movie has a tone set right there that is, these are children playing with each other. And it's so obvious that if you don't realize by the time they're presented like in the playground and they're doing the there's two kids that are drawing with chalk in the ground, and the Jets go around it. They respect their fellow kids. And in the new one, they're not in a playground. They're in the rubble of what used to be probably one of their homes. It's much more serious. They're not playing around. They have planned an actual hate crime. You get this sense of maturity and of anger and of not playfulness, not childness, not childlike wonder that we get in the first. When we see stepping over a child drawing chalk on the ground. And I think it's the most clever way you can show, like, that was child's play. They're playing around, they're kids, and they are being violent for the sake of being kids. These guys are pissed off at life and they don't respect anything other than themselves, and not even that, because they hate themselves so much. And so in the first movie we have this feeling of joy, and like they're playing around, and it is of course worrying because we know how the stakes come up, but they're playing all the time. The Jets and the Sharks, they're laughing at each other's jokes, and they have like this unspoken agreement to not let the police ruin their fun. So they work with each other against Krupke. And the first time we have a sense of reality and of depth and of feeling of this is real is, of course, when Tony and Maria cross eyes for the first time. Everything else fades away. They come into the mythical, surreal, oniric dance sequence that a lot of old Hollywood musicals had. And they don't have to say anything, they just know. It's so beautiful, they just know. They're dancing and it's in the dark and with the light, and they just know that they're meant to be. They don't have to say anything or do anything. They've known each other forever. And that's the first feeling of depth we have in the first film. And that changes a lot in the new film, because since we have this depth and this reality that's absolutely heartbreaking, that's surrounding these kids that should just be kids but cannot be allowed to be kids because their situation is so hard and the way they're handling it is so immature, that the first sense of playfulness and of joy and of teenage wonder is when Tony and Maria meet. And so they're completely opposites in that sense, that you have this, again, I'm sorry, playfulness that surrounds the depth of love that Maria and Tony have. And then you have this absolute desolating reality that these people are living. And for the first time, you have a glimpse of joy and of being kids and of being teenagers again in Tony and Maria. And they don't feel as predestined because Maria has to ask Tony to come play with her, to come be with her in this space of being allowed to be kids, because neither of them have been allowed to be kids probably ever. In the new one, even though Tony, I just remembered there's this thing that really bothers me in the dance scene, and I am going to put the clip if I can. I've talked to other people about it, and I've showed the scene, and they agree with me that when Tony sees Maria for the first time, we have Tony on screen like this. We see him in front, and then we have cut to another shot that looks, since it's moving and we saw Tony moving in the shot we have of him being introduced, we assume, because of where it's located, we assume that the camera, when we cut back, because it's moving in the same sense that Tony was moving, and it's sort of point of view-ish, not quite, but it is point of view-ish, we assume that's Tony's point of view. He's seeing Maria for the first time. And we cut back to Tony again moving, we follow him, and then we cut back to the camera moving, but then oh my god, I fucking hate this so much. We cut back to Tony, to the camera we think is Tony's point of view, and then we see Maria looking at God knows where in the horizon, and we're like, what is she looking at? And then we cut back and they're apparently looking at each other, and it pisses me off so much. It pisses me off so much. Okay, that was just like a quick parenthesis about the filmmaking of that. I love the film. I think it's really well done, but I just remember when I rewatched the film after seeing it in theaters for the first time. Because the first time I saw the film was in theaters. I was so pissed. I like stopped the movie and I threw the headphones and I was like, why did you do this, Steven Spielberg? Why did you choose to? Why did you say yes to this cut? It's horrible. I hate it. Nevertheless, we continue. I'm sorry. So yeah, you see Tony see Maria and she sees him, but the feeling is, of course, much more real, much more I'm seeing a girl. She's really pretty. I want to get to know her type of deal. And then Maria sees him and she's very intrigued by him. And since this Maria is a lot more, I'm going for it. They get together, and she takes him with her, and they start sort of talking. And she's like all over him. She's over him, and it's okay. I mean, it's fine. But it I don't know if I love that though, because it changes the entire star-crossed lovers thing that Romeo and Juliet has going for it and that West Side Story has going for it. It doesn't feel meant to be, feels worked for, which is fine. Of course, love is working. It's work. It's very hard work, and there can be instances of meant to be-ness in love, but it's hard work. And even though it's of course more realistic, and it is the first time we see them be kids, like children chasing each other around, which is very pretty in the new film because of what the rest of the movie is. It does feel disingenuous for me because I really liked the idea of Tony and Maria being meant to be. And so, of course, that seems the way they handle each other and the way the story happens and the way the love story happens, since the first film feels so meant to be, and it had to be this way, it had to happen because they had to happen, this doesn't. And of course that helps the idea that the movies are different and it changes. And of course I am now going to talk about
I say I want the Jets to be the number one.
Riff and how his characterization is, of course, a really big basis of why the movie changes entirely in the heart of it. First riff, Ross Tamblin's riff, is a kid. He's very Peter Pan type of boy. He's a bit charming. He's funny. He's mischievous. He's very mischievous. The Tamblin's riff, and he's very second in command. He's not that much of a leader, I don't think. He doesn't have this sense of depth that I think leaders ought to have. But he's very fun, and he's the leader of the Jets. And so the Jets, since their leader is so mischievous and he's like, haha, funny, I'm going to throw a can of paint at your face. Of the paint, of course, not a can. That happens in the new one, but I'm gonna get to that later. He feels very... The Jets have this sense of whimsy and of very Peter Pan, very boyish, very I don't want to grow up vibes of them joking around and them stepping up to authority in a very gotcha way, which is not a way to handle police. I don't want to say the way to handle police, but it's mischievous. It's very Peter Pan. It's very Peter Pan and the Lost Boys. These Jets. This riff, Tamblin's riff, is... Since he's so fun, like he's so mischievous and he's so childish, his relationship with Tony is... Even though they're equals, and they were equals, it feels very like... Slightly older brother. Like 1 year older brother. And... he feels very, I want to follow Tony around, but also like I want to grab my childhood as long as I can, and I'm having fun playing with around with these kids. So in that sense, that Riff, of course, is never aware of consequences, and he feels very Mercutio actually. Because the character he's based off of in Romeo and Juliet, who is Romeo's best friend, who is very cynical in a really sarcastic way. He's fun, and he's fun. He's fun. Mercutio's fun, and Romeo is so gloomy and so grounded and so romantic. And oh my god, I'm gonna die of love. And Mercutio is just like making fun of him and telling him about the fairy queen of dreams. Of course, Mercutio in Romeo and Juliet dies with a joke. And Ross Tamplin's Riff is very like that. He is not fully aware of how disastrous the consequences of what they do can be, because for him it's just fun. Just fun, and yeah, he doesn't like these people, but it's not that deep, and he does not feel that sad about where he's coming. Of course, the Jet song and Officer Krupke talks about how they feel about this, but it's lighthearted. It's something you grow out of, the Jets in the 61 version. You grow out of it and then you become a bartender or a pharmacist or whatever, but you grow out of it. And Mike Feist's riff, which for me is one of the highest high points of the entire film, is absolutely devastated, and so angry about the hand he's been given. He, as Tony, knows nothing's gonna change, but he does not want to be changed. He knows it's not gonna change because he actively doesn't want it to change. He knows he's dirt. He knows he comes from the dirt, and he's very pissed off about that, but it is his dirt. And it is the Jets' dirt. And so how dare the Puerto Ricans come and fill his dirt with their dirt. It's our territory. It's our. He knows. And there's the scene where he goes to buy the gun, and the bar owner, who sounds very Irish, it's probably Irish, says to Riff he knew his father and that he'll end up a bum like his father. Riff is entirely aware of that he's not gonna outgrow this, that the Jets is everything he has. And he knows the consequences of what that means, but he's looking for them because he hates his life. He hates this, and at the same time, since it's anything he's ever known, everything that threatens that status quo of filth pains him deeply. He hates Puerto Ricans because he feels they're taking what's his, but it's not even his, it's no one's. And Lieutenant Schrank says that to them after the first scene. This Riff is fully aware that life is horrible and that nothing's gonna change for him. And he doesn't care. He doesn't care what happens to him. He doesn't care what happens to anyone. He does know, like he does care about his Jets and about his West Side. And he's very angry at Tony for not caring anymore. And if Russ Temlin's Riff and Breimer's Tony have this very beautiful relationship and this very beautiful friendship of being brothers, Riff, we know and we learn, it's like a lost puppy that Tony has taken in. Riff and Tony in Spielberg's version, they're so angry at each other because for Riff, Tony represents everything he knows he should become in order to have a semi-decent life. And for Tony, Riff represents everything he's been trying to leave behind. And so they have a lot of resentment towards each other. And when we see them, they have this barrier in between them, a shelf of things in between them, and they're not able to cross it at that moment. And they will never be able to cross it throughout the film because they're angry at each other. They're very angry at each other because Tony knows that Riff goading him into doing things is how he got into trouble in the first place, because he wants to throw the responsibility of someone else, even though he knows that what he did is his responsibility. And Riff is pissed off at Tony because he cannot believe that Tony, his best friend, would leave him after he got out of jail. He cannot believe that, and he's pissed about it. And so he does things to show this anger, like he goes out with Tony's ex-girlfriend, and he does this to make Tony jealous, but not for her but for him. You know, like, I'm taking your place, and I don't want to take your place, but I'm taking it because I want to show you that you need to be here. And Tony doesn't care. He doesn't want to be the Jets leader. And Riff with Tony is very angry, and he tries to convince him to come back, and he tells Tony about how angry he is that his home is being invaded by people he doesn't like. I love how Mike Weiss says that line.
You know, I wake up to everything I know either getting sold or wrecked or being taken over by people that I don't like.
People I don't like. He does something with his nose. I love the delivery of that line. But yeah, that he's so desperate. He's so absolutely desperate for Tony to come back, but he doesn't want to show that to Tony. But when he's with the Jets, he's like, no, yeah, but Tony's coming back. Like, I mean, he's Tony, he's our leader, but he's not coming back. And the rest of the Jets know it, and the one that can't make peace with that is Riff. Riff's leadership is what ultimately leads to what happens and how things change, and them not having any consequence from Tony's part in the new one, or in the original one, in both, since Tony wants to like stick by the sidelines. They don't have like this, the voice of reason. Baby John tries to do that, but nobody takes him seriously because he's Baby John. He's a baby. It's in his name. And yeah, so that's Riff. And of course, Riff's death in the... Yeah, of course. Sorry, yeah, spoiler alert if you haven't seen the film and if you don't know what Romeo and Juliet is about. Riff gets killed in the middle of the film. No, not in the middle, in the climax of the film. I'm sorry. And his death in the original feels very accidental. They're playing with big guns. They don't know what they're doing, and it's very accidental because he like fighting with Tony because he wants to get away from Tony's grip, and Bernardo just has the dagger hanging there, and he like stumbles into Bernardo's dagger. And so his death, of course, is what keeps the movie going, and it's what ultimately leads to everything else that happens. It feels very deep because they really, really loved each other, Tony and Riff. Tony really saw Riff as something to protect us, as his brother from womb to tomb, earth to worm, which the original was not that. Tony losing Riff in the original is very tragic, in the sense that he lost his brother. He lost his best friend whom he loved and who made him smile and who was a bit crazy, but he loved him nonetheless. And then Riff's death in the new one is not that much of an accident, because the fight in itself is very different. It is accidental, but not as much as the original is. And the death of Riff feels tragic in the sense that Tony and Riff weren't in good terms when Riff died. And they had been fighting the entire film, and one of the instances that changed and that made very clear the change between Tony and Riff's relationship is having them sing Cool. Which is for me, and I'm gonna say it right now, Cool is a high point for both films for me in a musical sense and in a filmmaking sense in both movies. I think Cool is, oh, it's so good. I mean, I love the quintet, of course, the Tonight Quintet. It's gorgeous. It's Sondheim doing his thing of mixing so many things together. It's Bernstein. It's incredible. I love it. And then the colors and the music, whatever. But Cool for me, oh god, in the original, it's after the Rumble, and I am going to talk about it when I talk about the Jets. In the new one, it's Tony versus Riff in terms of please don't from Tony, and yes, I will from Riff. And it's a battle of what's gonna happen. The outcome of that struggle is the outcome of the fight against in between, but not like against the Sharks versus the Jets versus the Puerto Ricans, the Sharks. And it's so sad, that scene. It's so sad. It's so incredible. Like visually, it's incredible, and the sound the sound in Cool, it's so well done, and the choreography is great. And it pisses me off that Mike Feist didn't get anyone better to be his partner for that song. But of course, Riv's death feels so tragic because you know that these kids used to be brothers, used to be best friends, and they ended up becoming what each one hated the most, and that they couldn't work through that before he died, before Riff dies. And so the reason why Tony kills Bernardo is it's heavier, it's more thought through than in the original, which is just like instantly. It's instant, it's absolutely instant. He doesn't think about anything but my friend. Riff gets the movie a very lower layer, and his leadership of the Jets make in turn the Jets much more gritty and much more hurt. Whereas in the original one, the Jets are funny and they're lighthearted and they're assholes. They're absolute assholes, and we see it in another scene I will talk about in a minute. But they're kids. They're kids being kids. And in this one, it's kids that have to be adults and that have to be grown-ups. And the scene I'm talking about is in regard to Panita, of course, of when we see what hate can do to a person. But I want to talk about
Sure, they used Maria for an excuse to start World War III.
Anita, which is, I think, the only character that really remained almost the same in both films. Rita Moreno's Anita always had a lot of humor. Anita's super funny. She's super funny. She's really witty. She's very smart. She's very quick. She's very loud, which I love. I love that about Anita. She's fun. It is very fun, but she's also very mature, and she's very loving, and she's very tender, and she's very tough. That was the chair, wasn't me. Anita's very tough, and she has no problem showing that toughness and she puts herself out there, and she's just an impeccable woman, and she has a really incredible man by her side, Bernardo. And Rita Moreno's depiction of Anita is not that far away as Ariana DeBose's depiction of Anita, who is also all the things I just mentioned. And they're just fun. They're fun, and the only thing I guess that changes, the thing that changes the most in both Anitas is that the first Anita, Moreno's Anita, has contempt for Puerto Rico. She doesn't like Puerto Rico at all. She left Puerto Rico because not because she needed to, of course she needed to, but because she didn't like being there, and she doesn't. She's in New York, and she feels hope for the American dream and for, of course, becoming a New York woman, an American woman, as they say, which I don't appreciate the term American, but I'm not going to talk about that right now. But yeah, she loves New York, and she loves the U.S., and she's not very fond of her home country. And DeBose's Anita, even though she does say bad things about Puerto Rico, it's not as bad as Anita, the original Anita, does. And Ariana DeBose's Anita loves Puerto Rico, and she's very proud of where she comes from, but she knows she's better here. And of course, she knows that her opportunities as a woman, as a dark-skinned woman, and she says it, are bigger in the U.S. than they were back in Puerto Rico. Anita in the first movie, as I said when I was talking about Maria, is like a mother to Maria. She's a role model for Maria. So she's very matronly towards Maria. But Anita in the 21 version is an equal to Maria, and they play in the same league, and they occupy the same space. It's not I'm like your mom, I'm like your protector, I'm like your caregiver, and you're my child, but more of we're friends and we're partners and we share space together. We're family. Of course, we're family. And now I'm going to talk about that scene. Trigger warning, sexual abuse. And I'm going to use that scene to talk about
When you're a jet all the way.
the Jets. The Jets change mostly, of course, because of their leadership, as I said, but because, of course, they're kids. In the first, they're kids. The only Jet that feels a bit more deep is Ice. Ice is the one who steps up to become the leader of the Jets after Rift Ice. Ice is the one who was supposed to fight against Bernardo, the original, and he is the one who sings Cool.
Boy, crazy boy. Get cool, boy.
The greatest song in the entire film. Yeah, they're kids and they're having fun, and it's funny, and Officer Krupke's so witty and so ha ha ha, I'm making fun of you, your stupid cop. And so we have this sense of childness in all of the Jets until we get to that scene in which we realize that the Jets, the original Jets, don't in general have a clear consciousness of the consequences of their actions. They do things because they feel fun and because the one next to them is doing it, and because they're a bit heartbroken because Riff died. But when they try to rape Anita, they're treating it like a game, the original Jets, which is something sadly that we see a lot in childhood. The following of each other, of like, of course, Latina moms, and I think moms everywhere say, si tu amigo se tira del puente, te vas a tirar tú también, which means, of course, if your friend throws themselves off a bridge, you follow them. And you see that in that scene in more clearly in the original Jets. And of course, throughout the film, they're following each other around and doing stupid things because they see the other Jets doing it. The only one who questions it is Baby John. And it's interesting to see how anybody's in their way to feel included also wants to do these things, and in the end becomes the greatest ally that Tony has. Anybody's, we love non-binary representation in media. Go off. But yeah, Baby John is the only one who questions what they're doing. Like, maybe this is not great. Maybe we shouldn't be fighting against these people. Maybe it's not fun to fight each other in a violent way. And they most of them just tell him off because they think he's being like a child. And there's a couple of the Jets who actually have this violence within them in the original. Ice is one of them, I think, and Arab is the other. But then in the new one, Baby John, of course, again, is a voice of reason, but they're all very angry, like Riff. They're all pissed off at what they do. And Officer Krupke, even though it is fun, it's a way of the Jets calming down Baby John, because in the new version they are in a police office to be questioned about where and when the rumble is gonna happen. The Jets, in order to calm Baby John, do Officer Krupke as a joke, but they do finish the song with this very deep resentment of being treated as garbage. And that since they have been treated as garbage their entire life, that's what they think of themselves. It's what they see of themselves. They're all very violent and very angry and very radicalized by how society has decided to treat them, that since because they're born from not necessarily the best circumstances, are why they're of course bound forever to be nothing but dirt. They're very angry at that, and yet they keep turning in that cycle of violence and of sadness and of all of that. And so the Jets are very violent in nature. These Jets are not kids playing around, they're actually radicalized to hate deeply themselves and other people. And that's how they end up doing what they do, because Lieutenant Schrank says it in this film. They fight so hard against the Puerto Ricans when all of them are immigrants as well, and they come from immigrants from a Polish father and an Irish uncle, and that they were too once immigrants. And they're doing what led to them being the way they are and them being in the circumstances they are. They're continuing that cycle of violence. And they're just very angry all the time. And like, in general, of course, there's some that are less angry than others, but we see these Jets that have a lot of anger. They became bad. They became deaf to the rest of people, and they became absolutely unempathic, except for Baby John, who is Baby John for a reason. He's just getting into this. They are just luring him into this lifestyle, and when we see them try to rape Anita, it's not the blind following the blind, it's their way of getting back at Bernardo, who is no longer there and of course doing what history has taught men to do, is that in order to get back at someone, you have to attack their woman, because we're that. They tried to rape Anita with so much resentment and so much hate, and they do it out of absolute hate for Bernardo and for Anita and for the Puerto Ricans, because they believe that they're the reason that their neighborhood is being torn apart and the reality is changing. But we see very clearly that it's not their fault, it's the government's fault, because they're trying to build Lincoln Center there, and they don't care about the people that live there and how many lives they're destroying, because it's gonna be good for New York society. But they pit them against one another, and it makes no sense at all. I talked about the Jets, and now I'm going to talk about the Sharks, who are the other part of this coin in the original movie. Well, of course, we need to talk about Bernardo. Bernardo is very bland. He's a character that exists for the plot. He's not giving a lot of purpose or power or anything. We know very little of Bernardo in general. And the Sharks, as such, they're just, you can tell that they were attacked first by the Jets, so they started playing with them. They're much more older than the Jets, apparently, and so it's a bit more serious for the Sharks. And Bernardo is a lot more serious than Rith, but still willing to play along with him, and the Sharks are willing to play along with the Jets, in the sense of making fun of the police and making fun of each other, and that they are capable of sitting one next to the other and talk about how they're going to solve things and how they want the rumble to happen. But the new Sharks, they're not sharks, just immigrants that come to live in this place. And we have it very clear, stated very clearly in the movie visually, the new one. The Jets' west side is blue, and it's gray, and it's sad and somber. And then we have them dancing on the street, and we have like a shot that goes from the right side of the screen to the left, of them arriving into a street, being halted by something, and then we have a direct cut from the other side, which is very jarring, and we see the Puerto Rican and Latino west side, which is vibrant, oranges and yellows and reds, and the people are happy and they're thriving, and the Jets are angry at that they're thriving in the place where they couldn't and they weren't able to thrive, and so the fight of these Jets is against the entirety of the Puerto Rican immigration. It's not about the Sharks, and since they're so angry and it's not child's play anymore, the Sharks and the people the Puerto Ricans that step up to the plate with the Jets are the youngest, some of the youngest of the Sharks in terms of adulthood. Of course, they're not kids, they're like children. And they're the ones that are willing to fight a bit. And of course, Bernardo in this new one has a lot more character. David Alvarez is absolutely fantastic in this film. I love him. I love the little time we had with him. We had a lot of ability to bond with him. He's charming, and he cares a lot about his sister. He's very protective of his sister and Anita, and he just wants to do better by his family, and he's angry that he's getting attacked. So the Puerto Ricans are just defending themselves. They're not attacking. They're not there for following a rivalry that doesn't make any sense. They're just defending themselves, and they're defending their community. And since Bernardo is a boxer and he's a really good leader, they make him become the leader the movement against these kids that are wreaking havoc in very violent ways in their community. And so yeah, Bernardo is very much more of a character in this version, and he's very loving, and he's very devoted to his wife, girlfriend, fiance, partner, Anita, and he's very devoted to having Maria be the best she can be in the US, but he oversteps sometimes because he feels this. He still sees her as a child, and she grew up a lot while he was gone, and he doesn't realize that, and he doesn't know how to make peace with that, and so he wants to control her, and in controlling her and her rebelling against him, things start to happen. But it's Tony and Maria in this version are just an excuse for things to happen, because things were already happening. The violence was imminent. The violence in the new version is so profoundly imminent throughout the entirety of the interactions between the Jets and the Sharks. They're just about to hit each other all the time. They hate each other. It's hate. It's hate. It's absolute hate. They're not willing to play along. When they are confronted by the police together after the first scene, which is much more violent in the new one, they don't end in a dance. They end up hitting each other with paint cans in the face, and nailing, literally nailing with a hammer and a nail each other, and they're hitting each other. And when Shrank comes to confront them, they don't want to give each other away because they want to be able to have revenge on each other. Whereas in the original, it's more of a game, and they don't want to say anything because they have fun doing this to one another. And since this violence is so imminent, that's why the love story is used as an excuse to tell the story, because the story was gonna happen either way. The rumble was gonna happen either way, because that was the entire point of being at the ball. It was to talk about the rumble. And in the original, it's much more stated that the rumble is because of Tony and Maria, which is from the editing room. In the original, they were also going to talk about the rumble in the dance, but in Spielberg's West Side Story, it's much more violent from the beginning, and after Tony and Maria in Wise's and Robbins' version, the stakes get higher. I mean, the rumble was gonna happen, but the stakes got higher after Tony and Maria. So I just wanted to add that as a tiny side note. Yes, it's also an excuse, but since Tony and Maria feel so meant to be in the original version, it was gonna happen, no matter what the Jets and the Sharks did. And the thing is, the Jets and the Puerto Ricans in the new one were gonna happen regardless of a love story getting in the way and used as an excuse to do these things. You see what I mean? This is the biggest difference, and that's why the movies are so different. And from a stylistical point of view, the original, of course, is very much more classic Hollywood, but also the space in which it happens is very static. It's very reduced, and the new West Side Story feels that it has so much more at stake to it, and it's so much more sad, so much more hopeless, and so much bigger in how many people are involved in this and have consequences within this world, because the original is just relegated to the sharks and the jets, and Maria's parents don't get dragged into it, and Doc gets dragged into it because of Tony, but it doesn't take any more than them. But in the new one, the entire community, Puerto Rican community of the west side of New York, is being attacked systematically by the jets. And even though the police is also systematically fighting against them, they're also fighting against the jets, and people like the jets because they don't see them as worthy. And that's the reason why there's so much anger and so much violence and so much hate and so much pain, and why the movies are so drastically different in what they are trying to say. The original is a beautiful love story that ends in massacre because they were doomed from the beginning, but they were meant to be. And the new one is just pain and anger that was gonna happen. That's what's meant to be. What's meant to be is the deaths of Riff and Bernardo. And maybe Tony too. Like, maybe what was meant to be in Spielberg's version is the death and the violence for the Jets and the Sharks and the Puerto Rican side. In the original, the doom, the imminent doom, was that of Tony and Maria happening as a relationship that obviously ultimately is doomed because of these two sides, but they were meant to be. And I think it's a very big error in trying to compare these two movies, because at the end of the day, even though they do touch on the same basic premise and characters, the characters are so different, and the premise is seen from such a different point of view that they're so drastically different, and the songs have such drastically different meanings. And Cool is the biggest example of that. Even though America is also moved in place and the lyrics change to depict this side of Anita that actually really loves Puerto Rico. The biggest change is that of the pain, the absolute and utter pain the Jets are in throughout the entirety of the film. And that's what drives the movie, is that pain and that anger, and the correct response from the Puerto Ricans to that pain and that anger and that hate. It's very relevant. I mean, right now, and it's always relevant. The story, seeing the original West Side Story, everything that happens socially is very relevant. And to today, and of course, having adapted it the way they did it, Tony Kushner, who is the screenwriter for the new one that made tweaks from the original screenplay and all that, Tony Kushner is very renowned and very acclaimed because of the understanding of society he has. And of course, it's really interesting and very important how, lo and behold, history keeps repeating itself. And it was relevant in the 50s, and the reason why the movie was made the way it was made was because at that moment, that was a really big problematic they had in the West Side of New York. And it's incredible how we keep repeating the same cycle of violence as a society. And yeah, that's what I wanted to say about the characters. And the filmmaking is very different because it goes along with the same senses of whimsy and depth. Whimsy, it's surrounding the depth of the love, and then the depth of reality with the childness of the love story. And so it's very reflected in that sense. And of course, from camera work point of view, the mastery that White and Robbins have over the genre is so wonderfully depicted in the film, especially in that first scene, and of course in the cool scene. That's I'm going to put a tiny clip of Cool, the ballet in Cool, and of how it's lit and of how it's choreographed. It's so good. And then of course you have Spielberg doing what Spielberg does, which is a really great film. Not all of Spielberg's films are good, and I don't condone him as a person anymore. But there are some things that don't work for me, and it was a hot take recently with some friends that I don't think it's his best work. Not that my friends thought that it's his best work, but I think there's so many things he could have done differently, but at the end of the day, he did such an incredible job of bringing this story to modern times and making it feel as modern as as relevant, but also as timeless as the original did. So yeah, this is the end of the video. I have a lot more things to say about these films, both of them, in many different ways. But it is a very long film. It is a very long video, as of what I talked about, and I want to thank you all for being here, and thank you if you came this far. If you want to see a second part of me going deeper into the filmmaking aspects and how they show what I talked about in this lengthy video, and to touch on the music or anything, please let me know in the comments, and hope you like it. And if you like it, subscribe. And I will keep making videos, hopefully shorter ones, about different things and about different movies and about different shows. And yeah, this was my video on the characters of West Side Story and how they change their movies, their respective movies. And yeah, thank you for being here. I'll sign off for the meantime. I am, again, Sophia. Thank you for being here at After Soft, and I'll see you next time.